And welcome back. My name is Dr. David Vanderwalker from Fulton County Schools. I'm the coordinator for Performing Arts and Music Education. And with me is my good friend Josh Ray, Harrison High School Director of Bands, and he'll be sharing his musical expertise here with us in the webinar. And I've asked him to kind of talk about some things from a basic pedagogy in music, and then again, continuing the thread in our different discussions with different topics of things that we think need to be thinking about as we transition from the learning mode into practicing how to perform as we move into the competitive season. So Josh, give us a little bit of background about yourself. Had a little bit of a good start and a great program early on. You don't have to start at birth, but you could start at the high school side and give us a little bit of insight into you that you're willing to share. I'll just tell you, he's won 2 AAA national championships and had his ensembles on the state festival, our state conference performances, as well as the Music for All National Concert Festival. So confident that he's going to bring everything from a classroom perspective, from concert to musical arts, and how it all synthesizes in to create great performers regardless of the discipline. But give us a little bit of rundown on yourself, what you're willing to share, and then jump in.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Broken Arrow. I would have our center drum major plugged in the ear for these reps, just to make sure that they're right on the pulse that we want to have. If the battery and front ensemble aren't lining up, let's make sure that we have a staff member with a battery, making sure they're watching the drum major. I like to have a staff member behind the battery and watching the drum major and watching the battery's feet, or listening to what they're playing and making sure that what they're playing is lining up with the drum major's hands. And then have the front ensemble listen back. Once we had that lined up, let's start adding in the wind players. And if we're absolutely positive that all the wind players, the battery, they're all watching the drum major and they're on the drum major's hands, because we have staff members around making sure the kids are watching, and then we have staff members behind and watching drum major's hands, and it's like, yeah, the trumpets are playing with what we see, but we still hear a difference, then it might be not a performance issue, but an environmental issue. So then it's kind of a trial and error mode, where we're going to have a combination of some people watching and some people listening. And so you just kind of figure out, based on the environment, who's kind of in the pocket where they can just listen to the drum line and listen back, or who's in the front of the field, and instead of watching, they're listening back, because their sound is going to reach us first. and maybe the people on the exteriors, the furthest people out, the people furthest away from the drum line and furthest away from the front ensemble are watching, and just start adding in people or changing it, you 6 trumpets are gonna listen back instead of watch, and that's just gonna be trial and error, and that's gonna be lots of reps to try to figure that out. One thing to keep in mind, if you're on a band tower, typically our band towers are fairly close to the front sideline and the front ensemble. We can have performing members on the far exteriors of the field, on the 20s and outside the 20s. And they can be perfectly in time to the audience if we are further back, but to where we are close to the front ensemble, they can sound behind time. So I'm a little bit reluctant on changing performers and asking them to change what they're doing if they're pretty far out on the field, if I'm on my band tower when the front ensemble is really, really close to me, because by the time their sound reaches me all the way across, it's getting there pretty late compared to the front ensemble and the people in the center of the field. But further back, it might sound just fine. So that would be a situation you would have to wait till you get to a stadium to make those adjustments and do the trial and error of who's listening and who's watching, or try to get off your tower and get further back if you have the room for that. Another technique that you can do outside of the silent drill is to bop your music. And what bopping is you just play the initiation of the sound. So instead of playing a whole note, you're just going to play the left edge of the note as a bop. And the kids and you will learn very quickly who's not watching and where the timing issues are, because you're going to hear that but up, those flams happening across the ensemble. And I would do multiple reps of just bopping. And the kids are smart enough to realize that it doesn't sound right. They can hear those attacks arriving at different times. And that'll help them be more accountable, because they'll want to quickly adjust their watching and being on the drum major's hands. And then it'll also help you prescribe or determine where the vertical alignment issues are. And again, that's all outside of performance issues. We're assuming that the kids can all play their parts. Another thing that we can do is, especially if the battery is far away and not really in the center of the field, is we can have maybe a drum staff member have the metronome in a megavox, but very, very quietly, so just the drum line can hear it, and then they follow the drum line. And that can help us make sure that the drum line is in time. And that's a trial and error issue as well, and that can be a moment where the drum line is responsible for pulse, and our drum major watches the drum line feet. So, it's a lot of just trying to figure out where it's coming from, and then being creative on how to adjust, but it's just determining who's going to be listening, who's going to be watching the drum major's hands. Another thing I want to talk about is just core sound and how to develop that outside as opposed to inside. I highly advise people to be very consistent with the exercises that we use and the vocabulary that we use, both inside and out. In our program at Harrison, we're consistent with every part of the program and the process that we use. So what we do inside is very much the same as what we do outside. And with all 3 ensembles inside, concert band, symphonic band, and wind ensemble, and all the staff members, the directors, we teach the same way, the same exercises, and we use the same vocabulary, and it's very much a team-taught environment. And then that's the same exact processes that we use outside with the marching band, and trying to create a symphonic sound outside. And it's all about being consistent with that process and being consistent with that vocabulary. So some things that we do is we incorporate a lot of breathing, and we use tools like balloons and breathing tubes, and we do this inside and outside with woodwinds and brass. And what we're doing is we're trying to develop the oral skills and the physical skills for our kids to have a great oral concept, and then be able to physically play a really, really great sound in all dynamics and all registers. And we're going to address all 3 parts of the note with the processes that we use. And these are things that we do every day. And it's based a lot on long tones and long note exercises. And so we will start with just breathing in and teaching the kids how to breathe in, and focusing on what it feels like to breathe in correctly, what it looks like when you're breathing in correctly, and what it sounds like to breathe in correctly. And we focus on the bottom, middle, top of when we breathe, and we do a lot of exercises where we fill up in a certain amount of counts and then empty our tank in a certain amount of counts. And so we're understanding what it feels like to have full lungs, and we're understanding what it feels like to empty the lungs. And then we'll transfer that to the initiation. of the note, the left edge, and we do a lot of balloon exercises where we use balloons and we'll breathe in, and then we'll hit that resistance point in the balloon, and then want to blow past that. So there's a constant blowing up of the balloon. So now we're addressing the breath in, the initiation of the sound, and the middle of the note, and then hitting that resistance point and blowing past it. And we'll do that in a certain amount of counts. And then we transfer that to mouthpieces for the brass and the balloon, and then for our altos and low reeds, putting the balloon over the neck, and then for the clarinets, doing mouthpiece and barrel. This is a Freddie Martin technique that we use at Harrison, and then blowing up the balloon consistently with the mouthpiece in there, and then taking that out and then applying it to the instrument, and making sure that we're always constant of the breath in, the fast air out, and the initiation, and then keeping the note still, and doing that at all dynamic ranges, and keeping that at a concert F, and then changing that to different chords if we would like, and then applying it to on the move, and it's about keeping the note still at a pianissimo all the way up to a fortissimo, and then also keeping those things in tune. And then finally what we want to do is making sure that we're singing with whatever vowel that we choose, and then we're consistent with that vowel. If we're singing on an O or an Ah, that concept is always in our heads as we're playing, and so transitioning from mouthpieces and barrels or necks and brass mouthpieces to singing, and then applying that to the drill as well, and then going to the extremes of lows, highs, softs, and louds.
So we're about out of time, Josh. Is there one thing that you would advise folks as we shift into October? What would be your one encouragement for directors, maybe as we shift our mindset and think about it, if there would be one priority of how in practice performing, what would you recommend for them to think about?
I think it's being very mindful and have a healthy balance between the micro and the macro. And I like to always go into a performance that week being heavily on the macro, and building confidence and comfortability with putting chunks together and building endurance. So kids go into a performance feeling confident and not spending too much on the micro. Within the macro, just fixing what they can, detail, but giving them confidence in the large chunk.
The control freak in all of us, we feel like we can fix that if we get one more rep.
Right.
But at some point we forget, I think it's really important that we give kids a chance to let the brain process it all in one big chunk. And the more that they have a chance to practice doing that in the large chunk in a performance mindset, then the brain kind of connects those dots it's missing along the way. But if we don't ever give them a chance to do that, then we stick them out there in public with those disconnects, never having a chance to work themselves out so much, because we're trying to fix that one set, which we end up hiccuping in the middle of anyway because we won't quite get it fixed, right?
And they're connecting those dots, and the performance value and the emotion is much higher.
I remember years ago, Jay Bocook had a great nugget. He said, as a band director, if you think you can get that fixed in another couple of weeks if we keep working at it, think of all the things that if you would just change it and cut it right there, what you could fix in that process over the next 2 weeks instead of still fighting to save that one. Right. So I always remember that when Jay said that, and I think of that in this context too. At some point we need to kind of let the micro go and make sure we're prioritizing that macro. That's great. Thanks, Josh. Josh Ray, Harrison High School. We'll be back in just a moment with Alfred Watkins, Lassiter High School retired, in just a moment.